Uh, Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to our webinar entitled Building Back Higher Education Better from COVID-19 through Digital Transformation. Um, my name's Kuldip Sandhu, and I'm kindly joined today by Steve Riley from the University of Cambridge. And as we go along, I'm still admitting people to the webinar session. But just a few admin pieces. We will be recording the webinar so that anybody that couldn't make it today can see the recording, and secondly, also helps us to improve our presentation or our presentation skills for the future. I'm going to just run through the agenda of today and just walk you through that. So what we're going to do is just do introductions to myself and Steve. I'm going to set the context around HE and some of the changes that are going on there, some of the drivers. I've got some data points which will talk around higher education universities and some of the business technology trends. And I've got a 4 or 5 point kind of challenges and opportunities that HE are addressing or need to address as they go forward. We'll be then going into some of the change aspects, the change traits. We've got an interactive poll that we'd love you to be contributing to. We'll give you details as we go along. And then some of the types of organizations or institutions that we've seen emerging as a consequence of the pandemic. And there's a couple of frameworks we've developed around organizational change that me and Steve will talk through. We'll give our final thoughts around change in HE, and a lot of the change aspects that we're going to be talking about can not only be applied in higher education context, but also in other organizations from the experiences that we've seen. So without further ado, just a little overview of me. I've been in business, technology and IT environments for over 25 years. I've worked in industry, I've worked in consulting environments, built consulting practices, and over the last 4 or 5 years, I've also been doing quite a number of interim assignments, and particularly in higher education, as you can see, at the University of Cambridge, Durham University, University of London. And I fell in love with the sector over 8 years ago when I was working at the University of London International Academy. And I work, I'm the managing director of Innovative Quality Solutions, and I sit at that intersection between business and IT. And we really focus on digital IT transformation problems. And many of the problems that we've seen tend not to be around technology and process, but more around how you bring around cultural and people change. And we'll be talking about some of those as we go along. Steve, can you maybe you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so good morning, everybody, from a rather dreary East Anglia this morning. My name's Steve Riley. I was involved in IT and government for 40 years, finished up in the DWP, and when I left, I was the interim CIO, responsible in the DWP. I'm currently now, for the last 5 years, been at Cambridge University, where I'm the Chief Operating Officer, where we look after all the university's IT central services.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to have you with me to talk about some of the practicalities of the change that we've seen. Let me just set some context around higher education as a sector. Here's some facts that hopefully some of you might know, might not know. 2/3 of HE institutions have income above 100 million. And some of the big Russell Group universities, we're talking a billion and a half, sorry. Over a quarter of institutions that now have over 20,000 students and above. These are undergraduates to postgraduates to and a lot of international students. So there's a big drive to attract international students over the last few years as well, to actually generate income to support the activities of teachers, teaching and students as they go along. Approximately 55% of income now is generated from student fees, whereas there used to be a lot more revenue and support from government, but that's shifting as we go along. And actually, that's actually been a driver for change in the sector, especially around becoming a bit more commercialized in that aspect. And if you look at the kind of sector, compare it to sort of the legal and marketing sectors, it actually generates more annual turnover than both of those combined. And the other thing to say is, research universities have actually provide a tremendous amount of input into the economy and the growth of UK, and particularly around new innovative products and services. And a great example is the work that the universities have done in developing the vaccines for COVID-19. And we know about Oxford, we know about Imperial, and other universities that have been really at the forefront of innovation. And we must always remember that universities are educators of our future leaders, and we shouldn't fail them in that aspect. So that's just a little bit of context around universities and higher education. I've got some few other kind of data points that I wanted to go through. Here are some research articles that I picked up on. One was a source from HESA, a higher education body, who has been looking at how the impact of COVID is impacting the financial stability of institutions. And what we can see is that the number of universities on the left-hand side in the graph that that are now in deficit has quadrupled in 4 years, and that's only going to be increased by the impact of COVID-19. But there's a massive demand still for higher education, and if we look at globally, if you look at the picture on and the graph on the right-hand side, you can see that there's a 50% gap to fill in the next 10 years in kind of the research from Angel Calderon in 2018. This is doubling of students from 200 million to 400 by 2013. And I think we're all aware of the impact of COVID, and certainly it's kind of really acted as a trigger or the burning platform for digital change. And if you can see a little quote there from David Maguire, who's a interim principal and vice chancellor at University of Dundee, he's actually said that actually they delivered their 5-year digital strategy in 6 months, and that's very unique for the sector. And we'll be talking about that impact of COVID in HE, and actually learning from some Steve's world in terms of the practicalities of some of that as we go along. Here's some more, just a few more data points. What we can see here is some data from Gartner, and they went out to senior executives across sectors, and they looked at what do they think their organizations or institutions were going to be spending their money on going forward as a consequence of COVID-19 and that mass disruption. And you can see on the left-hand side, there, 60% are saying increasing digital business initiatives, trying to improve operational excellence and efficiency, and focusing on reducing costs. And on the right-hand side, they've also what that shows is the ability or the kind of spend that's going to happen in particularly technology. There's going to be mergers and acquisitions, and I think higher education with the post 1992 universities, there could be some acquisitions and mergers, and there's also corporate restructuring and R&D investment. So COVID has had a massive impact, not just on personal lives but organizations, and we need to build back better. And I think higher education is at that cusp where we need to be thinking about the customer, in this sense, the student or the academic researchers who are really trying to pioneer the delivery of academic excellence across institutions. So I in conjunction with Steve, I kind of pulled together some kind of the key considerations I think higher education institutions need to think about. And I try to flip it a little bit and say, what are the opportunities? I just want to walk through 3 or 4 of those areas and then get Steve's input on how how he sees that working in one of the major universities in the world. So obviously the first area is there's an absolute desire or need to protect existing revenue schemes, uh, from current cohorts, making sure that they not only are they safe and secure, but how can we strengthen the existing programs, and actually identifying alternative programs and which could be revenue streams, and maybe thinking of distance learning programs, bit like the Open University. You can do MBA courses, and diversifying that customer base and thinking about other geographies and countries where you can probably get a better input of international students above and beyond the one existing. Because as we all know, there are countries around the world that have actually been able to better manage the pandemic. And this is an opportunity for universities to kind of diversify their international cohort, whilst also managing the impact from Brexit and maybe the reduction in student numbers because of Brexit and other cost pressures. Second area that we talked about was how do we challenge the cost optimization piece, and thinking about which pockets or buckets of activity do we need to do and what do we don't need to do. So this is really about thinking about looking at capex and opex projects and programs across your institution, thinking what's non-core, eliminating that, and then focusing on short, medium, and long term, and thinking of where the areas of spend really need to be focused to give real differentiation, so that you're offering to students, be they undergraduate and postgraduate, minimizes, helps with minimizing operational costs, but also differentiates yourself against other universities in effect. The third area of focus was, well, whilst we can think about short, medium term as we, really put in, we've seen technology as actors that kind of business resilience and bring students back in. And as we get out of lockdown 3, we're going to, students are now going to be clamoring back to university. We need to ensure safety, but we need, as a university, we also need to think a longer term. Do we, are students best served from studying from home, or are they best served face to face in the classroom and or the lecture theatre? And I think there's got to be some consideration about a blended learning model and a delivery model, and how we satisfy students from experiential learning, face-to-face learning from their cohort, whilst also ensuring that some of the some aspects, especially if it's a practical course, needs to be done face-to-face. And how do you ensure social distancing and making sure that students are learning from practical, hands-on experimentation from some courses, whereas others don't. So is it going to be a mortar model? Is it click and learn? And these, I think, long-term initiatives or transformation of the university and into that blended model is something that needs to be really looked at. The fourth area was obviously moving to digital, and digital means many things to many people, but it's really using technology as an enabler for change and building in solutions. So the solutions could be around admissions, so maybe having having interviews or interviewing students online in their, where they're in local centres that can be developed, or having digital lectures available, doing examinations remotely. I think the universities had to quickly turn their lecture material online. They had to do examinations online, and that experience has now really kind of grown, and we need to kind of make sure we clean up some of that, so that it's much more available easily to, as we go to maybe a future hybrid delivery. And I think the important thing is there to always to remember that the digital experience or the pedagogy for students and lecturers needs to be considering the synchronous, asynchronous learning methods. and we always must be thinking or deepening the student experience. And I mean that not just at a university level, but also at the department, school level, college level, and round down to the individual within the faculty. And the second area is now, certainly this is something that me and Steve are going to be talking about, is how you deliver services in a more agile way, and agile in the sense that you're more adaptive to the changes. And IT have traditionally used agile development techniques in a very proactive way, and we'll be talking about that as we experience some of the work that we did in Cambridge around accelerating the digital impact of COVID-19 on delivery of services. The final area is, as we unlock, I think there's a massive need to ensure the well-being of students as well as staff. I think the lockdown has deprived many people of social interaction, as well as mental and physical experiences around keeping their health up to scratch. And we need to make sure that there's good employee support programs that help students as well as academics as well as postgraduates to and this is not just in HE, but this is across the country. We could argue that we need to make sure that we support our students as they come back in those areas, so that their health and well-being is looked after. Steve, I really do want to bring you in at this stage to get your thoughts and views on some of these areas, and if any of them resonate for you. And are you with me? Let me just get you off mute. You should be able to unmute yourself now, Steve.
Thanks, Kuldip. I think that's one of those moments there with unmute, so I hope everybody can hear me. Yeah. So let me talk about what we did here, which pretty much right across the life cycle of somebody entering the university and exiting at the end. So the first thing we needed to look at was what we call digital admissions. So the admissions process here involves an interview. It involves quite a lot of paperwork as people are interviewed and assessed, and an examination. And we have put all of that online. We did that last year, and we've done it again this year. So people are applying online and are interviewed through this medium we're on today and assessed as such. That's been a big change for the university. We've been able to link that pretty much, so you've got a standard experience now through applying online through the UCAS system, and then followed that through here. So that's been welcomed as well by people, that we've managed to streamline that process and get a lot of the paperwork out of that. We've then done a lot around lecture capture in terms of digital learning. So we were basically experimenting with that, piloting that in a small area. We were behind with that in most universities of being able to put their material online. We were behind with that. We've had to do a lot around that. So none of our lecture theatres, which are in the main quite old, were really capable of social distancing. So we've put all of the lectures online as part of the process. We've used some software called Panopto to do that, and that's been very successful. And I think that's broken down a lot of the barriers that people thought there would be about lecture capture. We've basically set up studios for lecturers to go in, have their lecture captured, and then displayed it on there. We've also had to do something around exams. So all our exams were in big old exams hall with serried ranks of desks. We put all of our assessments online last year, and are going to do that again this year. So that's a sort of a digital assessment. And there was quite a lot of innovation around that, around some of the practical courses as well around that. We've done a lot around in terms of student well-being. We co-created one of these Nightingale labs with AstraZeneca, and that has enabled us to do the testing for asymptomatic testing of students throughout this period, and that has helped in terms of giving reassurance both to the university and to the general population around where we were with that. Working from home, so we I think it's a bit like D-Day. We abandoned buildings pretty quickly here at Cambridge last March, and we had to get all these people working from home. That meant we had to do something around the personal desktop, something around storage around that, and then this sort of application that we're talking to, this medium that we're talking through here. So we deployed Teams, and that was all done really very quickly. So all of those things, digital admissions, digital assessment, digital learning, and student and staff wellbeing, all those things were done really very quickly, quicker than people had been doing them before. And as part of this next bit of this, we'll try and explore why we think not just this institution, but lots of institutions have responded well and more speedy than they may have done in the past with the as a result of the pandemic. So back to you, Kuldip.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for that. We'll be exploring that change that you talked about, that kind of real agile bit in a bit as well. So let me just kind of bring this together a bit. I think there's 6 key areas, Steve, that I think that university senior leaders need to focus on going forward as we move into whatever that new norm looks like. And I think that new norm will vary across sectors, but there's some commonality as well. And I think in the higher education sector, we obviously got to need to continue to be thinking about digital assessment. How do you assess students remotely? How do students learn synchronously and asynchronously? What's the pedagogical delivery model, that blended learning? I think the universities, used to generate a lot of income from their estates where they used to have conferences and exhibitions. And whilst they might return, but they need to be thinking about diversifying those revenue streams, and they're looking at new cohorts of students from different geographies, regions, globally even. Student recruitment goes hand in hand with that. Already mentioned student well-being and staff well-being. And finally, at the bottom there in that little 6 areas is employability. I think students coming out of university with their degrees, I think we need to be thinking about how we're going to support them from an employability, but what else can we give them to differentiate themselves against the competition? And businesses are either being closed or reducing their intakes because of the recession that's likely to come. So we need to be thinking about how universities can be better aligned to the business genders of across the UK. Steve, any thoughts around how we do this, how this all works for you?
Yeah, so I think it's really important when I was talking about what we did in terms of the digital assessment, digital learning, etc., that those things are all done. They need to be balanced together. There's a real risk with these things that you go off, and that picture we've got on there of a wheel is the way I think of it. All of these things have got to act in concert with one another. I think there's a danger when you do these things, you can get one of these, if you think about this as a muscle or a spoke, one of them can get rather bigger and thicker than the other, and then it sort of impacts on the others. So I think it's really important, and it was here when we were looking at all of these, that these things were looked at holistically. This is what we called our COVID plan had all of those elements in it, and all of them were always considered together. We didn't say, go off and do what you want with digital assessment. All of those things were constantly thought about as a total package, important for the student experience, it's important for the staff experience, the reputation of the university, and therefore that's important that you see all those things being taken together, as opposed to one of them growing at a much quicker rate than the other.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to switch a little tact a little bit. You know, when we designed this presentation webinar, we invariably were thinking of the impact of COVID on higher education, but building back better. And we wanted to share our experiences around transformation and change. And I've got some data. Here's a couple of webinars that we did in January and late last year. And we asked people across sectors, what's the biggest impediment for digital change? So if we think about the previous slide and those 6 areas, and we need to know, Steve said, we need to have it all integrated. We need to know the dependencies between those initiatives, but we shouldn't lose focus in all areas. One might predominate them more than the other at certain times. But what impedes organizations to change and transform and go with that sense of purpose and transform? And what this data that we've collected shows, and this is pretty much what we see across digital initiatives, is there's usually a challenge. There's usually a challenge around the culture. Is there a culture for change? Is there an appetite for change? What we want to do is kind of talk a little bit about our experiences around transformation and change. And I've got this little graph I've put up, which shows 2 types of change mechanisms that I've seen work and not work in organizations. And this is an XY graph. One's the Y graph around morale and competence as you transform and change, and then T is time on the X-axis. You can do a big bang approach where you get the CIO, COO, or the vice chancellor come in and really gung-ho, and there's really strong appetite for change, but it's done in a really authoritative kind of command and control way, whilst in some cases we build some competence initially, but it really has in many cases, what I've seen in the big bang approach, it does really demoralize people, because they really then start trying to understand what the impact of that change is on them and their organization. And sometimes they're going too fast. They can't learn and unlearn so quickly. Whilst you can recover from those, you can get some momentum going, but it does leave scars. And what I've seen work much better than that is where you apply a bit more of an agile, incremental approach, where you do buckets of things. You remember the slide we showed a few minutes ago, when those 6 areas, one can predominate compared to the other, but you're bringing change in across multiple areas, and you're building that momentum, you're building the trust and rapport, and you're taking people on a transformational journey. And my experiences is in IQS, and has shown, and across a number of small, medium, and large transformation programs, is that you get more buy-in and more morale and improvement in competence as you go on that wiggly line there. Steve, what's your thoughts with your 40 years of experience?
Thanks, Kuldip. So I think there's sort of, in my time, there's been sort of 5 areas that's commonly being described as where we get blockers in terms of digital transformation. Not focusing on value, not removing blockers, a lack of matrix, poor transformation and the vision, and a lack of board sponsorship. And those, I think, are 5 that I've heard and I've experienced over the years, over a number of these transformations that I've been on in IT organizations and business organizations, including here at the IT at Cambridge. So the 5th one, I think, is about a more agile approach to change. I think even if you've got these 5 things in today's world, given the speed at which things are changing, how you respond in your transformation through this more incremental approach seems to get you to a better place in a more speedy, and it also allows you to continue to deliver value. So on arriving at Cambridge, I found they'd been talking about this big bang incremental as opposed to incremental approach for 2 years. So by the time I got here, I already sensed there was great fatigue around the thing, because the value was not being delivered. People weren't delivering things. Everybody was focused on the big bang. And people get tired of it. It's not the way I think that people really absorb change anyway. So I don't subscribe to the theory that people don't like change. Okay, I think most of us change. If you think about your own life and relationships and all the other things you do, people changed. All the social change I've witnessed have all been changes that have occurred because of that more incremental approach as opposed to that big bang approach. So I can see that you get a lot more velocity in that top one than you do at the bottom one. Also allows you to continue to deliver value through the process. And I just think it's so, important that, you're focused on lots of little agile change rather than these sort of big bang things. And I can't think of a change program that I've been involved in, whether it's pension transformation, IT transformation in the DWP I was involved in. I cannot think that they would not have benefited from a more incremental agile approach.
Absolutely. Let's just kind of expand that a little bit, Steve. Here's a couple of graphs that I pulled in again from our experiences, is where what I've seen work is, you really need to identify your innovators, the people who are the ones that want to really kind of adopt the change quickly because they see the value in it. And there's usually some scarcity, as you can see in the graph here. And once that momentum builds, you still have to put in your change management structures or mechanisms, if you want to call it, and you get early adopters. And once you cross that chasm of the early adopters and there's social proof of the value that you talked about, Steve, you get the early majority and then the late majority. And what you don't need to do in so much is then focus on the laggards, because what happens is the innovators, the adopters, and the majority will show the value, and the laggards see it and they feel that they either need to be part of it, or they can see their value to them and they get on board. If they don't, they tend to disappear quite quickly. I wonder, Steve, if you've seen similar experiences.
Yeah, so I do think that there is a tendency to, in that big sort of transformation approach, to spend an awful lot of time worrying about people who are not bought into the situation, as opposed to the people who aren't. I've seen that cause a problem in terms of productivity. I'm also mindful of that quote of Winston Churchill's about, you'll never get to the end of a journey if you stop and throw stone at every dog that barks. I think there's a danger in this thing that you're trying to get everybody on board, and therefore you chase after the people who are not bought into it, rather than the innovators and the early adopters and the majority of those people. And I really have seen that on a number of occasions, that it's very difficult not to spend a lot of time and effort on the laggards. And when you reflect back and you look back at things you've done, you do wonder why you spend so much time with people who weren't engaged as opposed to the people who were. And I come back to, I think that's where you get social change that's happened, is because people have followed those sort of innovators and early adopters, and you haven't worried about the laggards. There's
Sure.
been enough social change to push that through.
Thank you, Steve. I think it's good time to get some input from our audience or attendees. So what we've got for you on this topic is a Slido poll survey. As you can see, there's a little so on your laptop or your mobile phone, there's a little barcode that should take you straight to the website. And there's a code there, #69387. And the question that we have for you all is, what type of organizational change method does your institution or your organization favor? Is it a big bang? Is it incremental, agile, iterative? Is it a combination of one or two? Or is it none of the above? And we really would appreciate your inputs on this one. I'm just going to, as this is a live poll, I'm just going to switch over to my the poll and start sharing my screen again. Just bear with me, everybody. And what we can see is the results coming in. We've got 4 people who have already voted. Please continue. We'll give you some time. Again, the barcode is there. The Slido and #69387 is the code. Please vote for your option. We'll give it a few more seconds. We have, if you're a consultant, it might be worth you just thinking about which organizations you worked in and where you've been, what's the approach worked for you best. Please continue to vote. We know there's at least 18 to 20 of us on this call, so I'm going to give it a little bit more time. We would really appreciate your inputs. And Steve, what are you seeing from the results so far?
So I think we've got like a split audience there. I think we've got 50-50. I think that I should, say that I still think you need a vision to do the incremental approach. I still think you need to know where you're going to get to. I just think that it's about trying to do it more incrementally in the way that you do it, and an ability to change and respond to what is happening to you as you move through the period that you're trying to get the change into. It's been a big thing here at Cambridge to move we've got a lot of technical debt here. Get rid of the technical debt, move into a much more digital world of self-service, of things that you might expect the way you can do business now outside of the university, and bring that in the same way for students. And I think that, that's been an important point about trying to do this incrementally. I don't think we would have been able to respond, that well to the COVID thing if we hadn't been attempting to move through this more of an incremental approach to changing that than the big bang.
Yeah.
We gave up on the big bang.
Yeah, and folks, please stay with Slido because we've got 2 more poll surveys to come. You've got that number. Stay with Slido on your laptop or your if you're in the office on your desktop, but more importantly your mobile. We're going to just switch back to the slides, and I've got another something else I would like to share with you as we move into the next poll. Is what I wanted to talk about is, well, what type of institution or organization is now what type of organizations are emerging as a consequence of the pandemic and COVID. And we've got 3 types of organizations that we've seen. There's the the protector organization. This is the organization that has stuck to its existing operating model and feels it's in denial, and it will go back to its old ways of working. It still has a poor customer service. It's been slashing costs, and it hasn't really reinvented itself with its new services, and it hasn't transformed or doesn't want to. and it's going to really stick to the norm or the old ways of working without bringing any agility. There's the organization B, which is kind of frozen. It's not the one that's been galvanized, or it's not the protector organization. It's stood still, and it's likely to disappear, or will do soon. Or more importantly, organization C has seen the burning platform COVID as an opportunity to reinvent itself, and it started to look at its customers, its communities, college, and its colleagues to rapidly think about how we can build new solutions. If you mentioned, think about what Steve was saying, University of Cambridge IT, started moving to remote working. They did online admissions. They did testing or interviews online with various students, and they're now thinking about all sorts of other digital IT initiatives to move them to a new world. And there's a couple of organizations I know in the commercial world, for example, M&S, they've got a transformation program called Never and Same Again, and Co-op are building a new platform that's linking groups and charities together. So what we'd like you to do is, in the second survey, back into Slido and tell us what type of organization do you think your institution is becoming or would like to become. Is it the protector, frozen, the galvanized, or a combination of the protector and galvanized, or none of the above? And I'll see if we can go back to the survey results to see what we have from everybody. And then, can you see my screen, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So please back into Slido, and we want to go to the next one. So second poll, what type of organization are you? We want to move on. Okay. Right, we're stuck here for some reason. Let's go into present mode. So can everybody please vote for what type of organization they would like it to be?
We've done this 3 or 4 times. This is the first time we've had this problem with it, so just give Kuldip some time to.
Yeah, just bear with me. There's something not quite right here. Let me just refresh my. Can we try again now? Are we still having problems? Okay. Okay. Let me refresh that again. Try again. Okay. Let's. Reset. Let me try once more. Just bear with me. I'm just going to try again to see if I can. Can people try again? Are they having still any luck with you, Steve? No.
No, it keeps bringing me back to the first survey.
Right. Just bear with me. I'm going to try once more to settings. reset results, reset. Okay, reset and present. How about now? A reset. No. Okay, we might have to skip that one if we're not getting any luck. Oh, here we go. We're off. And try now on this one. No, we're not getting that to work. What I might do is stop sharing on that and flick back to our presentation and share back to that. And we're just going to do one more. Steve, can you see me in which slide can you see me?
Change traits considerations.
Okay,
7.
so we'll have to park the poll. There's something wrong that I can't quite fix. So we're going to move on to the change traits. And as we've been talking through change and the Big Bang and the iterative, I wanted to just share some considerations around change. And if you look at this kind of wheel here, we've got the change ethos is kind of, well, do you enable your organization rather than command and control managing? That's a particular change trait. The second key trait that we always think about in change is don't aim for a perfect end state. You're never going to get it perfect. An important change trait is always thinking about delegated authority and how you can drive outcomes, being focused on outcomes and empowering people with the delivery. So, and that's about decisions, devolving decisions to the right teams, and having a burning platform. And Steve talked about having a vision, and a vision is really important. Having a purpose, so having a common goal or purpose is really important. And COVID-19 was a fantastic example of we need to. It's not about having to do something. We had to do something and move to remote working or move to online digital delivery. So that and linking that to the overall strategy and vision is really important. Item 6 is obviously focusing on outcomes rather than silos. So collaborating around problems and outcomes rather than structures and silos. Item 7 is something that we talked quite a lot about, is rather than being a leader that's actually coaching and guiding rather than micromanaging is really, really important. And involving stakeholders. Well, people always get worried about change because they don't know what's coming. So if you need to involve stakeholders, so you prepare them, you warn them, you give them time to absorb the change, and they're learning and unlearning as we go along. Steve, does any of those resonate with you?
Yeah, I think this is, I suppose the number 2, really, this sort of end state thing is the one that also links with this iterative thing. I think this, perfection can come at a great cost of productivity. Mm-hmm. And what your end state will be and describe in that, and all of the effort that goes into that, I think is a real danger that really affects productivity. And I've seen that again, not repeatedly, but several times, where the organization gets very internalized in what it's trying to change. It stops really being productive in what it's trying to do, and everybody is talking about the end state and not about the state we exist in today, which is a quite unusual thing if you think about it, if you were applying that to your sort of normal life around that. Managers who coach, is it, creating an organization where leadership is seen as being a supportive function, where that's supporting and allowing people to do what they need to do, works best for me in terms of organizations enabling people at the front line to make decisions based on guidelines, making sure they're supported in doing that, is really where you make the most change. I think that's where you get the most appropriate governance as well. With there does need to be oversight of what people are doing. I expressed that before in terms of all those things on the wheel being equal in order that the wheel will work properly, but it does give you much more of a chance of increasing velocity if you've empowered people to sort of get on with things. Outcome driven is just so important. How many times you get I've sat back in things and sort of thought about why are we doing this as opposed to what are we doing, is equally important as well. So I think all of those resonate with me, but some of them more than others about
Thank you.
are not really COVID specific.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift on to a couple of the change frameworks as well. So, for me, COVID-19 was a kind of burning platform to really bring around agile change. And what I mean by that is, it gave people the opportunity. We didn't need level of governance. Yes, we just need to get on with stuff. And I think, what I saw with a lot of people I've been talking to is that people galvanized. There's a sense of purpose. We need to do stuff. Let's get suppliers on board. We need to get, new licenses. We need to ensure that we've got enough capacity and storage power. We need to, rebuild laptops and get them out to our staff and our students. So there was a lot of a burning platform and an acknowledgement that people can do stuff. We're all very adaptable. We became very, very adaptable. And what this framework here is just trying to show you that change is normal. Before COVID-19 hit, I was talking to people around how the rapid adoption of technology and how that really has changed the organization to really adopt technology at pace, because new entrants or new organizations were coming on board with rapid way of delivering services, and organizations and institutions need to adapt quickly. So change is normal. We need to have a culture of change mentality. We need to think about our marketplace, our customers in terms of what they view as their needs, and to rationalizing that, and people rationalizing the importance and the emotional purpose for change, and identifying in our organization formal and informal mechanisms. So formally, we can all have the vision and the strategy and the purpose and so forth, but there's mechanisms that we need to develop in our organization, especially if we're working remotely, that people can go and learn and unlearn, and they can unload. So people need to unload about history, about where change hasn't worked before, the resistance around that, so they can unravel what's happening in the organizations going forward, and let employees be the drivers for change. And that's where we need leadership and the commitment to involve people at the lowest level, so that they are empowered to make the right decisions with a level of governance, and they can evolve and adapt as the organization is changing. And we need to continue to communicate. So there's a little blueprint I wanted to share. Steve, there's a little blueprint that you wanted to talk about as well.
Yeah, so this is all about trying to bring this holistic view of how organizations change through technology, people, process, ways of working, insight and analytics. And I come back to, whenever you're doing that you're viewing these 5 things together as a whole, and you don't go off and spend an inappropriate amount of time building up one of these, because all of these things need to work together. And have a look at the COVID, example here of, there could have been quite a long and, discussion about, the technology we deployed to do our homework and our team meetings, etc. We could have got into a whole sort of Zoom versus Teams thing. And we didn't do that, because we let people get on with that. They got on with the implementation. They were able to do it. We put the simplest processes in place for people to be able to set these things up. We worked together with people about what was working for them across the whole of that piece. And, you know, we've measured all of the time about the usage, how much people are spending on that. We issued something last week about, you know, what makes good team meetings, etc. So we're learning all the time as we deploy the technology. All of those 5 things need to work together. There's no point in one of them working unless all 5 of them are working. I think that's one of the points, as well as the agile point I'd want to make out of this, is that you have to have these things working together.
Thank you, Steve. We're just going to kind of give our final remarks as we come up to the hour. I put a detailed slide here for everybody to just kind of reflect on the totality of what needs to happen. I think this is a momentous moment. COVID has given us an opportunity to really transform and change. And I think it's about working out what's the best way to do it. I think from the poll survey and the data points I've collected over the last 10 to 12 months, iterative agile change, giving incremental value, using technology and digital as a way of engaging and bringing about value to your customer base, be it students and academics, is key. And I think building the future institution of 2030, really, I think there's an opportunity for organizations and institutions, let's say in the HE sector, to really think about what they want their academic institution to be. Is it going to be more click and learn, or is it going to be mortar? And thinking about their cohort, thinking about income revenues, looking at professionalizing the delivery of services in a more of an online way, and thinking about how to bring that change around, in my view, very agile in that incremental way. I think it could be a turning point for institutions to embrace that. Steve, what's your final remarks and thoughts?
Yeah, well, certainly COVID has given us a great opportunity to advance the digital journey here at Cambridge. It really has, you know, turbo boosted it in terms of what we need to do. And the challenge now is to make sure that we continue to follow through with this, that we can continue to be able to deliver consistently in a way that gives you a good, you know, customer journey with real insight into how people are using these things.
Thank you, Steve. I just wanted to do a final slide. We're easily contactable. You can see our email addresses, our LinkedIn profiles and contact numbers. I'm more than happy to take questions and feedback as well. And as you say, you can see on the slide there's Steve's contact details as well. We're up at the hour point. We're open to Q&A if anybody has any burning questions at this stage. Otherwise, we'll bring the webinar to close, and thank you for your attendance.
1 p.m. Hi, it's Donald here from F5 Networks. I hope we find you well. I'm just trading comms with Warburton.
I will unmute everybody so that they can, if they have any burning question, they can answer that. Ask it, sorry. Anything? Let me just go to security settings. Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want a burning. If there's a burning question, we'll take 1 or 2 if we can.
Hi, can I ask one? It's Samantha Bhatia here. Just want to know if you've learned any lessons on online pedagogy, on how to deliver online learning, any key lessons you've learned about delivering it, and what's worked, what's not worked, any key insights.
Mm-hmm. Steve, do you want to take that? Because that's something that's been heart of Cambridge's work. Oh, hold on. Let me just grab Steve. He's probably wondering why I've unmuted him. Not muted. has to unmute. Okay. Are you there, Steve?
So can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, it's a really good question. So I think what we have learned is it's very different from standing up in front of a classroom. Okay. So that may sound stating the obvious, but I think that was really something we have learned about what those things are. So what have they learned pedagogically is that, you know, probably more succinct, probably about making sure that the time taken, when I've looked at these, they're far more likely the lectures to be chunked up into pieces for students. There's a view that this is material that people will continue to look at afterwards. So how do you describe what's gone on before? You know, in other words, where does this particular lecture that you're coming from fit into a piece? That has also been important. But we have employed 2 learning technologists now who sit with the people, you know, the lecturers, and give some coaching around what is actually, you know, best practice in terms of speaking and movement, etc., etc. And so that's been, you know, really, it's very different, I think, is what I would say, and you need to give some real thought to that.
Yeah,
You know, it's not the same as just standing up and delivering.
Yeah, I would just add to that, some of the lecturers I spoke to, I was at University of Westminster, he said to me, I create material when I present for 10, 15 minutes, then I'm actually interacting with the student cohort, I'm asking for feedback, you know, getting in videos, other interactive ways. We try to make this interactive by having polls, right? Unfortunately, I couldn't get the second one to work, but my apologies on that. But, you know, the attention span of the cohort is something that I've, you know, really homed in on, and making sure that you've got opportunity for question, Q&A, sense checking. You know, you can't see the body language of people or students. You've got to try to engage or gauge that in different ways through chat functions, feedback, and clarifying questions and so forth.
Paul Hurst here, if I may. You mentioned about the 3 types of organisation, the protector organisation, and in particular the galvanised organisation. What I'd spotted within an organisation is you can have a mixture of people that either want things to stay as they are, go back to the old way of things, and then others, you know, there is certainly a 20%, you know, who want to galvanise it. Have you any comments on your observations? Have you seen within a single organisation those different types of behaviours?
Do you want to go first, Steve? Or?
Yeah. So yes, I would say that pretty much that's standard in terms of, you know, trying to get alignment. I don't think it's possible, is what I would say to you, to make sure that all of those groups are aligned. You do need to get some key people involved in it. I think one of the things I've noticed is that people spend too much time worrying about, you know, who are the people who are blocking, and not enough on the time people are going to enable it. So I go back to this thing about, you know, social change. You know, when I was growing up, and I you know, you guess by the number of years I've been working, I'm no spring chicken, but, you know, when I was growing up, if you'd have said that, you know, you would get a couple of 100 people in the park on a Saturday morning running around in a circle, people would have thought you were mad. Okay, if you'd have said to people, there's no, you know, there's no smoking. Well, I watch a lot of football. The first football match I went to, my abiding memory of is of cigarette smoke. That's what I smelled as I went in, or get wafted on it. You know, now you go to the game and nobody smoked. I think those things happen because it becomes acceptable to do that, and the people who are in an organization not want to do it follow what is going on because they can see that that has become acceptable to do that. So I'm a great believer in, you know, getting some momentum and people following you rather than waiting for everybody to move forward at the same time. Because what I've witnessed is that everybody gets hooked up to the slowest carriage. And it also go back to what I said earlier is that, you know, you spend so much time on the people who don't want to move rather than the people that do.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that, Steve. And Paul, I've worked in, I did a transformation, was in the Big Bang about 10 years ago, and it was a local authority. And what we ended up doing initially was focusing on the people who were kind of being very vocal and kind of anti the change. And there's various reasons why what transpired, but we lost people. We lost people very early. And it was difficult to build back the momentum. We did build it back, but it took it was a lot of hard effort. And actually, some of those people who couldn't see the social proof or couldn't see the value to them, because change is a very personal thing, in the sense that people need to be comfortable to see the path or the journey they are, and people's paths and journey vary according to abilities, skill sets, where they are in their working life, but also their personal lives. And it's very difficult to sometimes to really get what Steve was talking about. I call them laggards or non-believers, if you whatever you want to call them. You know, if you put all your time and effort into there, you're not going to be building momentum in the areas to galvanize the organization around change, and it could really scupper what you're trying to achieve. I'm not saying that you should not focus on them, but it shouldn't be the primary focus. If you build a quell, and actually the other thing that I've learned is actually getting them involved in the design of the change, and that's again back to that empowerment, getting people to co-create, be part of the design of the future. And I think that also helps if you can get them, you know, tap into their skills and their capabilities so they actually become part of the future. I think that's what I think is really important.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing. That's very much my experience as well. It's nice to hear that.
Thank you for that, Paul. I've noticed that a lot of the attendees have dropped off. I thank you for your question, Paul. I think we're going to bring the webinar to a close. Again, apologies for the slight mishap on the poll, second poll. We will look at that, but just want to say thank you for attending. And yourself, Steve, any final comments?
Just to say thanks both. Thanks, appreciated it, enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Was only one box came with that? There's only one box.
Yeah.
Did you have to sign?
Right.
Yeah, there should be some gin and tonics in